Hello, everyone. Hi. Thank you so much for joining us, Your Excellencies, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. My name is Hanako Montgomery. I'm an international correspondent with CNN, and today I'll be moderating a panel about global trade in a new era. Right before our eyes, the world order is shifting. Friendships are fraying. New spheres of influence are emerging, and trade rules, as we've known them, are changing in real time. In this new landscape, trade will never be the same, and I think arguably none of our countries, our people, will be the same. So in the face of this uncertainty, how can countries weather the storm? How can they make sure they're prioritizing their national interests with international cooperation? Fortunately, we have a great group of panelists here with us today who can help us answer some of these questions head on and make sense of these looming questions. Originally, we had one other panelist here, Laurent Saint-Martin, the Minister Delegate for Foreign Trade and French nationals abroad. I am told he is arriving late, about 15 minutes before our panel ends. So, you're still in good hands. We have 4 other panelists. And I would like to introduce each of them from now. To my immediate left is Mr. Bertrand Badre, Managing Partner of Blue Orange Sustainable Capital and former Managing Director of the World Bank Group. Next to Mr. Badre is Lars Hendrik Roller, Chairman of Berlin Global Dialogue. And joining us from Almaty is Mr. Timur Turlov, CEO and founder of Freedom Holding. And I'm also pleased to introduce Mr. Daniel Rundy, Senior Vice President at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Now, gentlemen, if you can each begin with a brief opening statement to get us started with our session, and then I'd like to move on to questions. Let's begin with you.
Thank you, Hanako, and I'm, of course, extremely pleased to be here today. It's quite extraordinary. I was born and raised in France in the last century, and I would have never imagined that I would discuss trade as a weapon. Never, ever. I mean, one of my dissertations was about the creation of WTO. Then, of course, this was followed by the admission of Russia, China, or Vietnam, for example. It was always moving in the same direction. Free trade, free trade, free trade. And then things started to unfold in the 2010s and then 2020s, obviously. I saw that when I was at the World Bank. And for me, it's fascinating to see how these reversals is happening. I think what we see is not just trade as a weapon. It's a change, it's a bigger shift in the way we operate in the world. We all feel it. It's pretty difficult to characterize. We feel overwhelmed by everything which is going on. I mean, trade is a number of issues. I mean, you name it, tariffs, and it's quite ironical that we discussed today at the time when the US court made the decision that Trump's tariffs were illegal. That's not quite unnoticed today, but it's also export ban, it's a number of barriers, etc. But for me, it goes, and I'll stop with that, it goes a little beyond that just trade. I think we are moving from a world, sorry to be a little pedantic, where basically Ricardo, the guy that makes the theory of free trade and the comparative advantages, was the king, was the master. It was about, free trade was leading the growth. You could not develop your country without entering into free trade, etc. So we were in a world where Ricardo was the name of the game, and we're moving into a world where Hobbes is the name of the game. Hobbes meaning everybody against everybody. Everybody is a wolf for the others. It's us versus they. And that's a big shift. And there are many reasons for that. We all know that. Geopolitical reasons, political reasons, economic reasons. We can rationalize all of this, but the truth is that we have shifted. And it's extremely difficult to imagine what comes next. So for me, trade as a weapon is just a signal, a symptom of something which is way bigger and which is also one of the topics of this forum. And I think we have plenty of time to discuss.
Yes, lots to get into.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hanako.
Mr. Roller?
The microphone is a little bit on the left, so I hope you can hear me. So I can follow up on that. I was also very much involved in the multilateral order, and it was interesting to hear the opening statements of the leaders, current leaders and past leaders. and what to do about it. I was Angela Merkel's economic advisor for 10 years, did the G7 and the G20, so we were all about multilateralism, and of course Germany benefited a lot from that, I think Europe in general. And now everything is changing. Right now, actually, there's a lot of chaos, and there's chaos about chaos. And a little bit what I'd like to discuss in this panel is where are we going and what we should be doing. And I close on that, you can try to preserve is a little bit what the discussion was this morning, also with middle powers and small countries who are, by the way, the losers of, or could potentially be the losers if the big guys get together, and Europe is clearly a big guy. So one is try to preserve multilateralism, including, reforming the international institutions, the UN, the WTO, etc., which is not going to be easy because it means really shifting powers in many ways. Or you can go towards a world of spheres of influence, which people are talking about, and I think we're moving, and it's interesting for Europe. Should Europe go with the United States or should we go with China? All that discussions. This is a European discussion we're having, and Europe is also, at a very important point of its phase. And I think that's dangerous if we get into spheres of influence, which we've been doing. By the way, all of those trends are not new. This has been happening already with the BRICS and other things like that. And I think there we should think about how do we work together if it is spheres of confidence. And the last one is all this bilateral stuff, which, the United States is proposing with its current president, who I worked with under Trump 1 for many years, and of course bilateral agreements we've done already in the past. And the problem, of course, with bilateral agreements, it's great for those two guys who are negotiating, but what about all the other ones who are not at the table? And that's why we were always very fond of the WTO, which is sort of becoming more and more irrelevant. But I think there will be bilateralism, but I think we should be very careful that the big guys are not dividing up the world amongst themselves bilaterally, because as your president was saying, or your president was saying this morning, and others were saying, we have global problems. Nobody alone can solve that. This is what we were trying to do in the last 20 years since World War II, by the way, with the help of the United States, mostly. And I think there's bilateralism and this transactionalism and this short run and hitting your friends in the face and then trying to make a deal. I don't think solves the global problems which we have at this point. But where the world is going, nobody really knows at this point.
Great, thank you. Mr. Terlov?
Thank you. I think the key value for most countries in the world is to keep their independence. And I think to be independent, you have to be not dependent much on someone. So you have to be not necessarily self-sufficient, but at least have a lot of multilateral relationship. So you have to depend on many different sides, which you can arbitrage and keep this balance. And I think in our country we know that very, very well. And that's what we see, what I see in our politics in general. So to be fully self-sufficient in this kind of the world, I think is not efficient at all. So world is getting even more and more and more integrated because of digitalization. And global products actually present on global markets. So we use a lot of products and services which is leading globally. Like Google leads almost everywhere in the world and have a huge market share in search. Like AI providers also started to lead and keep very, very, very big market share. I really believe that the economic growth and prosperity for any society depends very much on efficiency of our economy. And usually open economy is more efficient than the closed economy. It's definitely good to be very open. I think the only bad stuff to be when this open economics is being dependent on single player or something like that. And that's a risk of That's a risk of being dependent to your trade partner. And disruption of free trade, actually, in my opinion, can create some problems which finally may lead to less independence and more concentration in trade. Because of if we will lose at least some of our trade partners, so we'll be more dependent of the rest. But on the other hand, the current world is very efficient itself. Even if you can make a tariff on one country, so there will be a lot of players who will find a solution how to transfer these goods to different countries and then re-export. World is very digital. World is very efficient. World is pretty well connected. It's much, much different than it was, I don't know, 80 years ago, like we were discussed on the first panel. So we live in a new world. This world can speak, and with the rise of AI, information and education never were such accessible like it is. So we can exchange information now much, much better, and we can build a relationship much more efficient and keep this relationship. So our integration is growing everywhere. So we buying goods and services globally and selling them globally. I really believe that, and we as a fintech, we also understand that to be competitive at home, we need to be competitive globally. And we can't build a strategy for isolation. We still need to follow integrations, and that's still the only stuff for which can bring a prosperity.
Thank you. Mr. Rundy?
So one of the things I think about trade as a weapon is that trade as a weapon often works, maybe at least works in the short to medium term. So in Central Asia, many in the audience will know of something called the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. Can I just see, who knows what the Jackson-Vanik Amendment is in this room? Anybody knows? Okay. No one in Washington knows what it is. Even though everyone in Central Asia knows what it is, almost nobody in DC knows what it is. It was set up in 1974, and it was an amendment to a trade act to put pressure on the Soviet Union to allow for the free emigration of Jews and other religious dissidents. And it worked. It was linking trade to human rights. And many people were able to leave the Soviet Union for the United States and Israel as a result of Jackson-Vanik. That's the good news. The bad news is the Soviet Union ended a long time ago, more than 35 years ago, and Russia, which was sort of the inheritor of a lot of the Soviet Union stuff, got released from Jackson-Vanik, but a number of Central Asian countries have been kind of trapped in this time warp of being on the Jackson-Vanik bad list or naughty list, and every year they have to get a waiver, and so it worked, but now it doesn't work anymore, and now it's hard to kind of undo it. So that's an example of as trade as a weapon that's local that I think many of you can relate to. And one of the most important things the U.S. could do if it wanted to have a better relationship with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan is fix that. And our political process, you would think you'd be able to fix it, and so far we haven't been able to fix it. The second example of trade as a weapon is how Russia has used energy as a weapon in Europe. Nord Stream or Ukraine or other countries where they've used gas as a weapon. And so many people would say, okay, well, over time you can maybe say, oh, I'm going to find an alternate source of gas, I'll go get it from Qatar, I'll get it from Algeria, but that takes a long time. So trade as a weapon in the short run to the medium run works, but there's all sorts of other consequences associated with it.
Thank you very much. Now, just to get the ball rolling and get this conversation started, Mr. Badre, in one word, how would you describe the state of global trade? Would you say grim, chaotic, dire?
I think it's chaotic. I mean, definitely. Again, for many years it was easy to see the GDP growth and say GDP growth in the global economy is 4 to 6%, I mean, 20 years ago, and trade is 6 to 10%. And trade is really the locomotive of growth. And that was very predictable. I mean, you moved year in, year out, same. And today, it's very, very difficult to make any connection. And of course, notwithstanding the headlines changing every day, etc., when you're, I'm an investor, some people here are also in the business, how do you plan in this world? Because it's not just trade, it's also tax, it's also migrations, visas, etc. Everything is becoming more unpredictable. And so, unfortunately, I mean, 20 years ago, people start to popularize the acronym VUCA, you know, for volatile, uncertain, etc. It was a little early. Now we are exactly in that things. Chaotic, and it's difficult to make sense of all of this, and it's creating tensions everywhere. I mean, consumers, investors, businessmen, everybody is uncertain. And of course, it creates a totally suboptimal outcome at every level. Precisely as my colleague said earlier, at a time where we need to have a global reaction to address the global challenges, I think it was said this morning, and precisely at the moment where we need to basically transform, I would say, globalization into something I would call planetarization to address all the challenges, climate number one, we are doing exactly the opposite. So that adds to the stress and the chaos.
Great, thank you. I mean, indeed it is. And especially also, we discussed this just a few minutes earlier, but the U.S. President Trump's tariffs, right, and the recent New York court ruling, and just the chaos that could potentially lead from that as well.
I mean, just when you see this court ruling, it comes after several weeks of application of the tariff. So people have already started to pay billions of dollars of tariffs. Then the court steps in. Nobody knows exactly. I mean, the U.S. government is appealing that decision. It will go to the Supreme Court. What do you do in the meantime? Do you keep your container carrier at bay and say, let's wait until it's solved or not? It is impossible to address, technically. So the US is a kind of epitomizing this chaos, but it goes beyond. I mean, some other countries are playing that game. That's what I say. It's a bigger trend where everybody is trying to flex its muscle. We argue it's sovereignty, it's safety, it's tax results. I mean, we have all plenty of reasons to move in that direction. In a way, we move in a world where we have the feeling that we are in a finite world. In a finite world, let's grab the max I can for me. That's as simple as that. And that's terrible because there are big cycles. We had this, I mean, at the beginning of the 20th century, and we saw the results. After that, we kind of reopened the door. And now we are back to a moment where, you know, you want to grab, including in the space, actually. Under the sea, in the space, everywhere. And trade is part of this arsenal of new weapons.
Indeed. And on that point, Mr. Roller, I saw you were raising your hand, so I think you have a lot of comments and thoughts. But economists were warning the U.S. President Donald Trump about the potential implications of his tariff policies, his tariff war, if you would say, before his Liberation Day. Given the way that things are playing out right now, did you think it was going to be this bad?
No, but...
Oh, your mic.
I think that... Sorry. No, but I think that I think that I don't get the economic strategy of the United States, but it's none of my business. I'm a European. But there are two theories in the United States. Sort of one is, you know, tariffs don't really solve any problems, inflation and blah blah blah. The other one is it's a part of a grand strategy. And it takes a little bit of pain and chaos. And then the United States is going to be great because everybody's going to relocate to the United States. Manufacturing is going to be part of that.
Almost a necessary evil.
I come from a country where manufacturing is very important, but actually I think that's a wrong strategy. I think 75% of the US economy is services. So there is this, so then people say, let's give him 6 months and he's going to get better deals from everybody. So the other argument is not only relocating, and under Trump 1, he did that actually smartly with a tax plan, which he did. And the other one is he's going to get better deals. And whether he's going to get better deals, I don't know. I hope the Europeans are going to look for a balanced deal, and not only that because we are screwing for 40 years that country, that we owe them anything. And as a German, of course, I know very well that, you know, we owe a lot to the United States, including the security part of it. So there are these two theories in the United States, and let's see. I don't think it's going to work. On the more general trade point, I think that trade and weapon, whatever or pressure, I think that's not new. I think we've used trade and market power to get things done in the world for many, many years. The question is only, what's your goal? Do you actually use your trade power or your market power to destroy the multilateral trading system or the multilateral system as a whole? Or do you do it actually to promote trade? I mean, what we've done in the past, also examples from the United States, they've used their power to open up markets, to break protectionist regimes. But they're now sort of doing it in the other way, and I think this is wrong. And on top of it, you get reactions from other countries. National security is becoming more important. Protectionism is, in one way or the other, it's a big word, is also becoming more important. And the rest of the world is actually following suit, because we're all going down that route into a world where we're all in it for ourselves. It's the big ones doing trades with the big ones. And this whole engine of economic growth, which has produced a lot of inequality, by the way. It's not true that globalization has benefited everybody. I think that's a big problem of globalization, that we're going to lose all of that. So there's nothing wrong with using trade as, call it a weapon or as pressure. The question is, what are you using this power for? And I think we're using it for the wrong thing at this point.
You mentioned that globalization doesn't benefit everyone, which I'm sure some of our panelists have thoughts about that as well. But what do you think these issues of trade really reveal about the vulnerabilities in our current geoeconomic system?
Sorry, say that again?
What do you think the current state of our geoeconomic system, what do you think the vulnerabilities that we're seeing exposed due to this trade war, this tariff war, what do you think that's exposing?
Well, I think it makes it much worse. I think it's not only the chaos. So there's a short-run problem with all that chaos, which we don't really know what's going to happen, as you were saying. And the other one is a structural shift. And I think there's using, being national security is more. Actually, the tariffs are all justified, Section 232, the ones which are still legal at this point, actually, under national security grounds. And actually, Europe is also going in that direction. We have a big debate in Europe where we need to protect ourselves. And my answer to all of that would be, look, I mean, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. I don't think we've lost everything already, but there's a transformation of multilateralism. And if we go more towards bilateral deals, because the multilateral system cannot be saved, and I think we should try to save it as much as possible, let's network all of us. Let's not all have a bilateral deal with the United States only, but let's intensify our trade and our relationships amongst ourselves. And that includes middle powers and small. So I think Europe is actually doing that. Maros Sefcovic, who's the trade commissioner, is doing all the negotiations. He's doing trade negotiations with many countries around the world. So let's have sort of a network of bilaterals, at least that, if we lose some ground on the multilateralism.
Thank you. And Mr. Chorlov, as a businessman in Kazakhstan, actually the richest man in Kazakhstan now, as of 2 weeks ago, I'm sure this tariff war... yes, as of 2 weeks ago. I'm sure this tariff war is affecting many businesses like yours. How are you dealing with this uncertainty? How are you preparing for what's to come?
I think the key problem of all these trade wars is disrupting of trust and disrupting of confidence, which of course not yet disrupted because it's been built over a very long period of time. So, and I think the United States, European Union spent a lot of time to create a reputation of predictable partner with stable rules and regulations, and so nobody can expect that you can ship something to the United States, and when this ship will arrive, you will have to pay like 100% tax on that, which you will never know when you just send your ship there. And and maybe we see in the market reactions. The stock market is going up and down, and try to react to this new style of global policy. buying and then selling, setting record on growth and setting record on losing some value, it's quite unusual. In my opinion, the trust and confidence is a great treasure of developed countries. So that's why they are such rich in the end of the day. Because most of developed countries now is not most efficient economics anymore. But they still in economics with the most predictable regimes, with the highest political stability, with the highest stability and of rule of law, and with a great investor confidence, internal and external, business confidence. And in my opinion, it's very crucial to keep this confidence, to keep this confidence in international relationship, and not to create, not to let your counterparts know that now you're definitely not predictable. So that you have to ensure your risk of tariffs, you have to think and add some margin because you never know how your trip will be finished when you will finally arrive. So that's, I think, a very unusual stuff, because when we hear that the tariffs will be doubled, then it will be eliminated. So now market is still have a confidence, and they still believe in that. But if we will abuse that confidence long enough, it will be very difficult to restore that confidence afterwards. And in my opinion, we see that a lot of Asian countries now, they have a much younger population, they have much more tech optimistic people at the end of the day, and that's a big driver of productivity in these countries. And I believe that digitalization can benefit these early adopters maybe faster than original developers of this technology. Because yes, the United States and Europe still a developer of a lot of technologies, but not the first implementator of that, which is bad for them. But I believe that this strong institutional environment, this strong institutional ecosystem of predictability and confidence is still creates such a lot of value that even some minor lack of efficiency in technology doesn't matter so much. But if this process will not be restored, and if we will not still get back to some predictability and some less hostile way of shocking people, I think in the end of the day we can that will help for a lot of already developed and rich countries to continue go forward, because I'm still sure that of course it's a very huge demand in different societies. It's a huge demand in American society to change stuff, and for some hard negotiation with the rest of the world. But I really believe that the American leader will be wise enough to know the limit of these hard negotiations.
Well, we'll see.
We will get to predictability.
Right. Thank you. And Mr. Rundy, kind of tangentially related, but in Kazakhstan, as you mentioned, we have Jackson Vanik and the unique implications of that. I'm wondering, I mean, with this tariff war, is this sort of a double storm? Is this the perfect storm for Kazakhstan?
Well, I went out and bought a car on March 31st before Liberation Day. So I voted for Donald Trump, but I also, and I don't regret it, but I would also say that there is this issue of predictability that's come up in this conversation. I would say that for Kazakhstan, let me just say a couple of things about why this is happening in the United States. I mean, I think he got a popular vote majority, an electoral college majority. He has a 53% approval rating right now, and more than 50% of the American electorate believes that they're going in the right direction. It's the first time in like 20 or 25 years. He was elected on migration. He was elected on fighting political correctness. He was elected on inflation. Trade was not one of the issues. I believe the American voter and the people that voted for Donald Trump are willing to give him a pass on what may be described as some of the unpredictability that may result as a result of these tariffs because of these other issues. And if I think about how Trump is using these tariffs, he's using them in the case of Mexico to say, I want you to deal with migration, I want you to deal with Chinese economic activity using USMCA as a backdoor, and third, I want you to deal with fentanyl. And in the case of China, he is saying, if you don't help us deal with our fentanyl problem, because his electorate, which is rural voters, are being killed in the tens of thousands every year by the fentanyl epidemic, if you don't deal with that, we're going to put 100%, 200%, 300% tariffs. And many Americans, up until now at least, have been willing to say they're willing to accept that. And so I would just say that so that's what's driving a lot of this. He remains popular. And now let's see where we are in 6 months. If the price of, toys is too high, or I can't buy a Mercedes-Benz at a reasonable price, let's see how the American electorate feels then. But I do think up until now he has been given a pass by his voters and by the American people. And he remains a popular president. So having said all that, as it relates to Kazakhstan, I think that Kazakhstan has this Jackson Vanik issue, which I think grates on Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan's a great development success story. And Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan and others are like, why do we have this issue that's an anachronism? This has been described as an anachronism. And they're correct. Kazakhstan was also there was a 27% tariff put on Kazakhstan. Uzbekistan got a 10% tariff. The Trump administration has used whether they have a trade surplus or a trade deficit with a country as the metric. We can have debates about whether that's the right way to do it or not, but that has been the way. That we're not going to change their views about how they look at the world. We can have a conversation, try and convince them. We're not going to convince them to look at the world any other way than they currently look at the world. So I think it is a challenge for Kazakhstan. I also think we haven't talked about Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and what that means for Kazakhstan and what that potentially also means. So that's shifted all sorts of trade routes and impacted Central Asia as well. The northern corridor that goes through Russia is become a trickier thing. People have rethought whether they want to buy Russian gas. The European Union has said they're going to stop buying, they're going to get off the Russian gas, cocaine, if you will, the drug of Russian gas. They've also said that, and you also look at things like, there's like more interest in things like the middle corridor. You also saying things like, so I think there are some risks and opportunities for Kazakhstan. There's some risks and opportunities for Central Asia. Let me just say one other thing and I'll stop. There's a third example of trade as a weapon. When COVID happened, China threatened the United States and said, we're going to stop selling you pills, your pharmaceuticals, and we're going to stop selling you ventilators. Those were grounds for an economic divorce. So we've been in the process of getting an economic divorce from China. All sorts of words have sprung up since then. Nearshoring, friendshoring, allied shoring, you've all heard these terms, right? That's a result of what happened in COVID. So Kazakhstan could be and should be a nearshore, allied shore, alternative shore to China. As Timur was saying, there's an interest in diversification of sources. Kazakhstan has the opportunity to be a metals processor. I don't want to be dependent on China for metals processing. You guys do a lot of mining. You guys don't do a lot of metals processing. You guys would be a great boon to the world if you could figure out how to process more metals, because I don't want to buy processed metals from China anymore for a whole bunch of reasons, national security reasons or otherwise. Once they said they were going to cut off the pills and ventilators, then it was time to have a divorce. But if they invade Taiwan or they threaten to invade Taiwan, we haven't figured this out. We've spent about 10 or 15 years kind of as the West trying to sort out this issue of metals. We haven't figured this out. We're about 10 years behind where we need to be. Kazakhstan could be a big solution. You guys have the ability to be a solution to this challenge that's in the West. I'll stop there.
Mr. Roller, it looked like you wanted to say something a bit earlier.
No, actually, I think I wanted to say one thing about the trust issue. I think that's important. And I know there's this discussion about hard power and soft power in the world, and I think We all have our nationalistic galleries to play for, also in Germany, by the way. If this German government doesn't perform, we're going to have a problem, where the voters are going to vote for, parties which tell them, you are being taken advantage by foreigners. Similar issue as in many other countries. So we don't want that. And I think building trust, I think, is very important. And I think building trust is also, so yeah, my boss for 10 years, Angela Merkel, in Europe, very often we were the strongest economy in Europe. We basically did something, this might come as a surprise, which was not to our advantage, because we thought we're going to get it back many, many times later on. So if you're very strong, it's actually very important sometimes, if you have sort of global issues to solve, that sometimes you don't extort the maximum. You actually give. It's also in personal life. That's how you build trust. You're building long-run relationships. I know this is difficult. It's very difficult, and there's lots of, Putin was obviously somebody which, started a war, and Angela Merkel tried to prevent that. Obviously, it didn't work. So there's no trust at all. And I think that, but I think building that trust also, I think there's also in the leaders' statements, it sounds a bit like spaced out, but I think it's a very important issue, and it's not, you don't just look only for your personal interest. You also give something. And I think that's, I think that's what I wanted to say. Yeah, I think this is important to keep that in mind, that we build this. And if you look at behavior by big and strong countries, and they basically just look after their own interest, very narrowly defined, that might even sell with the voters for a certain while. I don't think it is something which gets us there in the long run. Anyways, yeah.
And Mr. Batra, I know you want to say something, and we definitely want to hear from you. I do also want to ask, though, to you specifically, given the fact that we've kind of referenced this throughout the conversation. I mean, Kazakhstan is seeing Russia's invasion of Ukraine on its doorstep, right? That invasion, that conflict is one of the biggest issues we've seen in the 21st century. I'm wondering, can you explore the ways in which economic warfare has changed because of that war? And of course, the comments you wanted to say.
Well, first, I think we are being taken, I would say, hostage of a shift of the narrative, the global narrative. I refer to my early years as a student, and at that time we promoted the idea that it was a win-win strategy. Everybody was benefiting. My neighbor rightly said that it was win-win-lose for certain, but still we had this vision of win-win. And suddenly we are moving to a narrative where it's a zero-sum game. That if I win, you lose. If you win, I lose. It's as simple as that. And who is the decision maker on that? More and more the government or the very big conglomerates and companies. And that is destroying trust. So that's really the shift we are seeing today. And of course, as I said earlier, one of this movement that we are seeing is that we are in a world which is under pressure, a world which is finite. And so in this finite world, I want to grab the maximum I can. The conflict with Ukraine is part of this. What's going on in the space is also part of this. What's going on under the sea is part of this. And it comes with consequences. I mean, in a way where if you think that it's a zero-sum game, it's a finite world, you want to flex your muscle and you want to get as much as you can. And of course it has consequences. And of course the conflict in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, was a wake-up call for many. I mean, including not only in Germany, but in Europe and in many countries in the world. We realized that, I mean, after COVID, that we had built a very sophisticated, very fragile, but very sophisticated system. I mean, all the supply chain, etc. We didn't know about this. But the first time you realize that in a smartphone you have like 2,000 suppliers coming from 150 countries, etc. It's super complex. And suddenly you realize that it's okay on an Excel spreadsheet, but in real life the Excel spreadsheet might not be that great. And then you cannot rescue Excel with PowerPoint. That's the point. And that's where we are today. We realize that we have to adjust. Let me take an example, and I close with that. But it's exactly the same as Ukraine. You build things, you build your business plan, you build your growth on the fact that things will continue as they are, before the chaos. So for instance, you say UK is joining the EU. And then good news, we built a tunnel under the channel. So that's very great. So you build part of the automobile industry based on that. So you have a lot of pieces which move back and forth under the channel with the train, and you develop a car industry in the UK. Your Excel spreadsheet say it can grow forever. And suddenly, you have the Brexit. What do we do? You have the same story with China. You had the same story with Russian gas, etc. We had built a whole system on interdependence and globalization. And today, it's breaking up in a number of places. And then it gives, of course, a big role with the government. You discuss about friends showing, but who is making the decision on who is your friend or who is not your friend? It's not me. I have friends in certain countries, but my government say no, etc. So we are really shifting the paradigm. And that's what is pretty stressful. And coming to your point, Timur, this has an impact on trust. I mean, the heart of the economy is trust. Now, who can you trust? Who is deciding who you can trust? At what price? For how long? Because things can turn around. So I think we're living a pretty intense moment. So I think it was great that you choose to address this topic up front. Because this is a massive topic. It's not just trade, it's the whole system, as I say. How do you handle migrations? How do you handle tax? And how do you handle all of your economic policy? Are we moving into, again, really in a zero-sum game for all? Or are we capable of rescuing what's left of the win-win strategy we've developed over the past few years?
Great, thank you.
So I think the zero-sum game is, of course, exactly what it is. Suppose we go into a world of zero-sum thinking. Suppose we go, and we are going that way. Europe is going to have to spend, it's actually also good for Europe, Europe is going to have to spend much more on defense. We're going to buy European weapons. We're not going to buy American weapons, even though right now we don't have them, actually. So it's going to go into this very much fragmented world where national security, we don't want to work with China anymore. I'm against that. I think we should continue working with China, by the way. There's a big debate in Europe, in my country, but I'm not in the government anymore precisely because we don't want that. We do need to work with others, even if they're not democratic, but not be stupid and defend our interests. But if we are going to all go into our things. The big guys are going to work with themselves. The small ones are going to suffer. National security. And what is the consequence? We can do that. I think Europe may actually do well, actually, because we're a rich continent. If we can agree. The problem in Europe is we can't agree on anything, or at least it's been very difficult in the past, because there's not one country. We go into that direction, I don't think the world is going to be a better place. It's going to be lower growth, it is not good for development, it's not good for climate, it's not good for global health. It may be good for some very rich people in certain countries, but it's the wrong way to go. And that's why I think we should resist that. And we should, if we can keep up the multilateral system, let's at least have lots of relationships around the world, including between Europe and I know there's a strategic agreement which was signed, I think, in April between Europe and Central Asia. Let's work together. And let's not have zero sum. Let's try look for win-win situations. Because I don't think, in the end, this is going to be the good world I want to live in. Sorry, very emotional statement. But,
Mr. Rundy, I saw you shaking your head when he mentioned doing business with China. Is that a no-go?
Look, the term Cold War hasn't been used in this conference yet, but I think a lot of people in Washington, certainly the working phrase is great power competition. But I think among many people in the Republican Party, I don't necessarily think President Trump thinks this way, but there are a lot of people in the Republican Party on the Capitol Hill and elsewhere who think we're in a second Cold War. And so as a result, I think that how we look at trade is going to be impacted by this. I think that the fact that we've set up a committee on the Chinese Communist Party in the U.S. Congress, I think reflects this concern about China, and I think China, Russia, Iran, in my view, and I think in many people's view in Washington, is that we're going to have a much let's put it this way, we're going to have a much colder relationship, and I think that's how a lot of things are going to be looked at in Washington is through that lens, and I think we're kidding ourselves if we don't accept that reality.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Chorlov, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, and I think, it's also, in this discussion, we definitely have to mention how individuals are affected, right, due to this economic warfare. And again, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, you have received some criticism in the media about your company and yourself potentially benefiting from the war in Ukraine. And how do you, stay afloat amid all of that?
It's, I think we live in an extremely unpredictable world, and disposal of our big Russian assets late 2022 definitely were not in not our key benefit of that stuff. So we spent a lot of time, a lot of money, we invested a lot to Russian market, and then we sold this company with some discount to equity capital, even despite all that investment to technology. We also realized that our key knowledge is how to build the bridges, how to connect markets, how to connect nationals, how to connect the stock markets. And we simply realized that it will be extremely difficult to connect Russian market with the rest of the world. And that's why we actually decided to dispose our Russian assets and go out, be concentrated on Central Asia, to be concentrated on Europe. We definitely not the beneficiary of that, because we lost our key asset that time with hundreds of thousands customers relationship, which is even more important. I think the role of Central Asian economy is grown because of that. Now we only investment grade country in Central Asia, in all this region. We only country with open capital account. But that's a good example of how we can be, that's not a zero-sum game. Our sum unfortunately become less. And even if we took some market share which we never had before because of competition with Russia, but the total market shrinked a lot as a result of this war, and confidence also were disrupted. So in this case, maybe I'm much more lucky than many of my competitors in Russia or anywhere else, but how all this environment, all this war, this consequences of that war is a big cost for all our economics and also for our company, because now we should invest hundreds of people to investigate every payment, to investigate every contract, to onboard customers in much more complicated procedures. So even if you have a very efficient digital business, rules and regulation can make that not such efficient as before. We don't have other options. So frankly speaking, I'm happy that I have a chance still to do my job, still to connect markets, still to create fintech, still to develop international relations in insurance, in e-commerce, in many other stuffs. But but at the end of the day, Kazakhstan, the cost of doing business with internationals for Kazakhstan became higher. It's not restricted. I think our president do a great diplomacy, and we still have a lot of friends. But the cost of doing business is higher for everyone, for anyway, because everybody understands that we have a big neighbor, and everybody have to pay a lot of attention to any player who touch Russia at this moment, and we should prove that we're not guilty absolutely every time, for reason and for not. That's also part of the game, and everything which does not kill us makes us stronger, as you remember. And that's a good example, because last 3 years we met so much problems and crises from real problems and crises till some very strange and which some strange allegations which completely false, which is also some part of this game. But what doesn't kill you make it stronger, and I know that people in Kazakhstan finally became much stronger in the last 3 years in their international relationship, in their system and controls to survive and to grow.
I'm so sorry to cut you off because I realize we're running out of time soon. But I did want to just follow up with that. It sounds like you've had to, of course, adapt your business and change, and you've mentioned digitalization. But clearly, of course, there are winners and losers as a result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Have you benefited from the Russian invasion of Ukraine business-wise?
That's my answer, actually. We lost a lot. Yes, we secured our position now because we are almost only firm who provides the services. But the growth of our compliance cost, in my opinion, if that never happened, we were much richer than we are. So it still was a losing game for us for a lot of reasons. Yes, at this moment, we definitely took some market share which belonged to Russia before. But we lost much more in the end of the day because of many, many different reasons. And no, in my opinion, that's very crazy situation. I'm not the beneficiary of that for completely no reason. Because I think nobody, rather than financial sector, suffered more from this disruption of payments, disruption of rising compliance costs and all of that stuff.
Great, thank you. And again, we are nearing time, but the Minister Delegate has just joined us. Thank you very much. So I did want to ask each of you, the panelists, just to kind of give us a very, very brief, because again, we are reaching near the time, of just how countries, how economies can prepare themselves if all that really lies ahead is uncertainty. Again, if you could just summarize in less than a minute, I would really appreciate it. Maybe we can start with you, Mr. Badre.
I think we have to play short-term and long-term. So short-term, unfortunately, the rules of the game have shifted and we have to abide by these new rules. It's extremely unfortunate. I mean, as just been said, sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but globally we lose. And long-term, and I think it's important, I'm speaking next to my minister, I'm speaking in Kazakhstan, I think we all have a particular responsibility in kind of imagining what comes next. We just cannot look and say, okay, my God, you know, it's like the guy jumping from the tower and they say at every floor, so far so good. No, we have to find a parachute and find a new system.
Thank you. Mr. Roller?
Yeah, I think we need to rebalance globalization, not getting rid of multilateralism, preserving it, but rebalancing. And what I mean by that is reducing dependencies. I think, you know, the example on Russian energy, that was obviously a big thing. We're also very dependent on the United States with defense. I think we need to, as the US President has been asking for many years, we should be more independent. So I think we should never be dependent too much on anybody. This includes anybody, also friends, I think, because you never know what happens. But at the same time, you should diversify and build more relationships around the world. This is part of actually reducing your dependence, is having options. And that's why I think we should have trade deals with India, with Asia, Latin America, and including, I think, also a relationship with China.
Thank you. Mr. Turlov?
I'm sure that even despite all these problems, that's a great chance for Kazakhstan to not just survive here, but to become a really political hub and economical hub for not just for Central Asia, but also to be a trustworthy partner for many different countries, for the United States, for Europe, for Asia, and to be a market who will try to to benefit building this relationship and facilitating this relationship in benefits of our neighbors, in benefits of our citizens in the end of the day, because we unfortunately not such rich country, and we also don't have much pleasure to be inefficient. So we have to be focused on our internal efficiency and make sure that we will not hurt our efficiency breaking some relationship with any of our partners and with any of our counterparts. Because only economic growth and our multilateralism is, I think, a key reason to and a key guarantee for our independence as a country and for our further growth.
Thank you.
So
Mr.
it's certainly unpredictable. I said earlier I bought a German car. I'm really happy with it, but I think the system was imperfect, and I think from Trump's perspective that this required some sort of major disruption. And my hope is that there will be some adjustments that will help us return to something akin to a win-win situation in the medium term. It may not be in the next 2 to 3 years, but in the medium term we might return to something like that. I do think there are opportunities for Kazakhstan and Central Asia in this very complex environment. One is you get along with everybody. Two, your location, it's really hard to get here from the United States, but you're centrally located in Central Asia, right? So you got, location is a plus and a minus, make it a plus. And then I'd say, I think there are some areas, I think no one's going to want to depend on China or Russia or even, other countries as well for anything. And so you all have a lot of potential. I used the example of metals processing. If you can move out, if you could solve the world's problem and be the alternate to China on metals processing and move it along the middle corridor, that would be an amazing contribution to the world for Kazakhstan and the rest of Central Asia, maybe using Turkmenistan gas. That's not an original thought. Someone else said that to me the other day. So that's my hope.
Thank you. We're all waiting for that direct flight from D.C. to Astana.
Yeah, no direct flights from that's the other thing, sorry. My other deep thought, we did a big study 10 years ago. How do we deepen U.S.-Kazakhstan ties? My deepest thought, direct flights.
It would solve a lot of headaches, yeah. So thank you so much for joining us, Minister. Just to briefly introduce you, you are the Minister Delegate for Foreign Trade and French Nationals Abroad, Minister Laurent Saint-Martin. I believe you have a closing remark for us prepared. Is that correct?
Thank you very much for having me. I'll be brief because I see that you already turned the light off.
We started around 5 minutes late, so I'm saying we have 5 minutes extra.
We'll be very brief. Now, I think in a nutshell, first of all, last thing you said is really true. About direct flight, we are joking about that, but it's really important, actually. And what you said about DC, I could do the same about Paris. As soon as you have a direct flight, you completely change the relationship in terms of people, tourism, of course, but also about trade and investment. It's everything can start from a direct flight sometime. Getting back to our debate, you use the word weapon for the title of your panel. I think we have to analyze which kind of weapon are we talking about and what can be the consequences of those weapons. I don't really follow the ones who are saying that the world is changing, that we are changing the system, that it's completely falling apart. I don't really think so. I think rules are changing. And consequences are real, directly and indirectly. That's for sure. I do believe that every strength, every country, every private corporate, every key people and sector have to adapt. That's for sure. But I don't really see a new world closing. I think we are still in the same world, but the rules are changing, and the most powerful ones are changing the rules. And to be honest, I think we used to live during the last decades in a kind of special level playing field momentum, or trying to be. that we are living now, but it is where we were way before. So this is a kind of jungle rule that is coming back, and everyone has to adapt. So I'm talking, of course, from a French perspective and to some extent from a European perspective. I think if you're talking about weapon as trade, of course the first direct consequence is how deep and how important do we destroy value with this new trade war and what's happening when we're talking about tariff, etc. From Europe perspective, it's huge. It's huge. So when I say we have to adapt, of course, we have to avoid this negative agenda that will make Europe destroy value, having less export. And from the US perspective, for example, we do believe that the consequences sometimes can be even better than for Europe and for other parts of the world in terms of inflation and in terms of recession it can create. So this weapon, if trade is a weapon, has many different consequences. And direct ones are different depending on who are the targets. That's the first point. Second point, indirect consequences. And I think this is the most dangerous and the most difficult to anticipate. Because roads, when you're talking about trade, are changing very rapidly. Of course, I'm talking here about a lot of counterparts from other countries. We don't agree on everything, but there is one common point, is that we have to diversify partnerships. Everybody is talking about diversifying partnership, and it's fully normal. Because when there is an earthquake, of course, you have to adapt and you have to see new partners and you have to look for new ways of trading, investments, etc. And of course, GDP growth countries, GDP growth areas are, of course, for everyone, part of the world where everyone wants to create new partnership and to cooperate more. But the indirect effect, and maybe the most dangerous one when we are talking about trade as a weapon, is what can be rerouted that some countries and some continents don't want. Talking about overcapacities, for example, when you are getting your industry back, as we are doing in Europe, and of course there are the overcapacities from China coming to Europe, for example, we have to protect Europe, and this is new, even if it has started before. We have to accelerate protecting Europe, even if this is not our first positive agenda, if I can say so. So indirect consequences are maybe at least as important, if not most important, than the direct consequences of this weapon, which is trade. And of course, the third part is how you make yourself stronger during these very specific times. And I heard Bertrand Badré talking about the fact that history has never linearity in it, and you are building things that are breaking and you have to adapt all the time. Multilateralism is one of them. Level playing field is one of them. So, of course, you have to think about yourself and how you make yourself stronger. And for Europe, I think this is a real wake-up call. How can we change Europe as a genuine economic and investment strength when we are negotiating, when we are creating cooperation with other parts of the world? Europe has made a great achievement this last decade, which is internal peace. Europe has made great achievement in terms of unique market, about regulation, sometimes a bit too much. But Europe now has an agenda that belongs to itself, which is how to become a genuine strength, being able to negotiate, being able to retaliate if needed. I say if needed because this won't ever be our own agenda facing US or other part of the world. We want 0 for 0. This is our agenda.
Minister, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but I think we did get the signal from the lights.
Yeah.
It is about time to wrap up.
This will be my last word. You have to be able to retaliate, otherwise you're not a strength. And you have to diversify and to find new friends and new partners. This is maybe the new shape of the world, I would say, but this is not a new world.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for staying a bit longer for this panel. It was a fascinating discussion. Clearly, it's an inflection point, what's happening right now in global trade. It's definitely a point of perhaps identity crises for countries, but also a moment of growth. Thank you again.